Abortion, one of those topics you never bring up at the dinner table. But if you are sitting in front of the TV right now with a Swanson TV dinner, I apologize. This next story is going to make you lose your appetite. Two ethicists in Australia are making the case to make newborn abortions legit. Yes, that's right. To give pro-choice doctors and parents the right to end a new baby's life after it is born. Alberto Giuliani and Francesca Minerva want infanticide renamed to newborn abortion. If the baby's well-being that puts the family at risk, even if the baby has a shot at an acceptable life, no good. Down syndrome is one example they give, saying that even though retarded babies can be happy, the economic burden to the family and society is unbearable. These so-called ethicists give the thumbs up to killing a newborn if the parents are psychologically, economically, or socially affected. In other words, they can do one of these newborn abortions on a whim. They used to throw unwanted babies over the cliffs in ancient Greece. I thought that kind of thinking ended back then. Guess I was wrong. For more on the abortion debate, we turn to Andrea Mrozek from the Institute of Marriage and Family. Andrea, what do you think of that?
Well, sadly, this is not new. About 10 years or so ago, in the mid-90s, an ethicist by the name of Peter Singer made exactly the same argument, put forward that parents ought to be able to decide to end the life of their child after birth as well. So while it sounds very shocking, this is actually an old argument that has been stated before. It's already out there. These new ethicists putting it forward appear to have been from the same school as Peter Singer, so perhaps they're students of his, and they are reiterating his ideas about after-birth abortion.
Well, you know, this goes back a bit, too, to the controversy over late-term abortions. And the argument was if it had not yet left the mother's body, then it was not born. So to be late term, the head showing, that sort of thing, would be a legitimate abortion under the laws in the United States and in Canada. Now, I mean, I cannot see once the baby is fully out, how even if it has two heads, that killing it would not be murder.
Well, look, the problem with the pro-choice arguments, and every Canadian has to consider this for him or herself, but there's a continuity of life. Those of us on the pro-life side, and I count myself there, say that life begins when the embryo is created. And it's a very, very early point, and we say from this point on, we all started as embryos, and therefore at this point it's a life, and therefore ought to be defended. That's very extreme for some Canadians, but it is very logically consistent if you are pro-choice and you are unable to say at what point a life becomes a life or at what point it matters. It is very logically consistent to say that if a baby just on the other side of the birth canal inside a mother's womb can be aborted or killed, that it can be afterwards as well, because obviously the baby just in the months and even some would say years after birth is not sentient, is not thinking, is not, some might even say feeling. They aren't conscious. These are sorts of things that Peter Singer and the new ethicists putting forward this argument are talking about. So they're very, very utilitarian about it. And yes, it is very scary. Unfortunately, if you are pro-choice, I think it's something you have to be thinking about. I'm not saying Canadians support this. They don't. But logically, it actually does make some form of sense.
Well, you know, you're going to have a hard time convincing any government to get involved in this debate. You know, the Canadian, the Harper government, you know, is supposedly a conservative right-wing party, just shies away from even bringing up the abortion debate and then any other contentious issues such as that. But before you go, I want to ask you if you've been following the crayon case in Kitchener, where the little girl drew on a whiteboard a picture of a gun, and the next thing you know, the father is being searched, he's being body searched and that sort of thing. And then a person who is on the school board calls themselves a co-parent, that the school teacher, the school and the schools are co-parenting your child? How bizarre is that?
Well, I definitely see that as being a major problem. There's no such thing as educators co-parenting. Parents are the prime educators of their children. Parents are in charge. Parents actually contract out with the public school system, so to speak, that the public school system would care for and educate their child during the day, but in no way, shape, or form does that make the educator into a co-parent.
That's right. The last time I looked at my property taxes, I was paying them to teach. They weren't paying me to help raise my child. They weren't paying me for the food, for their clothing on their back, or for their education, or for their allowance. So the co-parenting thing is so bogus, yet this is how people are thinking. This is how the social worker world is thinking now.
Well, and it's very wrong to think that, and parents ought to be, I think that's an extreme case what's happened in Kitchener, but parents, I think, ought to be aware and assert their rights as parents that they are the prime educators of their children.
I'm sorry, I missed what you just said there. I'm sorry, Andrea.
Oh, I just think parents should be aware of the situation in Kitchener, even though it's on the extreme side. But certainly parents should be aware of it and aware that they are the prime educators of their children, and therefore they have that control over what their children does and doesn't learn at school.
Well, I can tell you this. If they're thinking it in Kitchener, they're thinking the same way in other cities, because the education cadre is a very small group of people. Even though they had large numbers, they all tend to think along the same way, and it's like a programming of your child. And if anybody thinks they're a co-parent to my child when she was growing up, another thing coming. Thank you very much, Andrea. Appreciate you being with us tonight. Appreciate it.